18 months ago, we got one of these at home, and I've got a 4-year-old and a nearly 6-year-old, and they just started talking to it. And so who's got one of these, and who knows what they are and kind of what they do, and who has no idea and thought this was some dating event with some girl called Alexa. So basically, we had one of these. We had one in the kitchen. And for the first kind of few weeks, it couldn't understand my son, but could understand my daughter. He got very annoyed, and then we'd ask her to ask it things, and all the usual stuff like play music, jokes, knock jokes, make fart sounds, all the mature adult things that we like to do. And then a few things happened. So firstly, they started being rude to it and not saying please and thank you. And then they started saying not please and thank you to us. So we started having to build this type of culture and say, well, either is it a robot and a machine? Because to them, it's a person. There is someone very small called Alexa inside this box that they talk to. And from a kid's point of view, the fairies and elves and all these different things, like to them, it makes complete sense. So they don't understand that it is just a machine. So, and it just clicked. It was one of these things that when like for a lot of us in the room, when people start sending emojis and not texting or writing emails, and there's this generational shift with technology. And normally it kind of goes from a youth upwards, as people phones, and then it goes up and up and up. But with whilst this was happening with the kids, I was like, this is the next thing that's going to come. But at the same time, I'd given one to a friend of mine, one of the small dots, and he'd give it to his, I think she's 87 year old Nan. And from a point of view of just her being able to turn on the radio, get kind of news and them type of things. And more and more you hear these things that actually a lot of them being used for enhanced elderly care, because on your app, on the Alexa app, you can see all the requests that are going through. So if you don't hear anything or see anything in the list for a few hours or maybe a few days, then they're not asking it for things. So then maybe there's something that they need to look into. So for the first time, a new interface is kind of hitting from both ends and coming from the elderly and the youth, and kind of eventually hitting at the peak, of people in kind of the 30s and 40s, which has kind of never been known before, which kind of changes how we build things, because as you build stuff for mobile, you would, all the ruler apps come out, and then all the games come out, and then it goes on. But actually now we're having to build elderly care apps and also fart sounds. And it's not just obviously at home. Voice is kind of going to be, in the house, in the office, more so in the car, especially now since you can't legally use your phone in the car. It's continuing to go, but it's all going to eventually congregate on your person. So things like AirPods, the wireless earbuds, and eventually kind of Apple spectacles that no doubt will be out in a few years. All these things will produce things, AR, as well as give you auditable responses for you to talk to and for you to hear things in near real time. At the moment, we're in this position where obviously Alexa is well known for speaker, and Amazon are extending that range. But also, if you look in the Amazon app, Alexa is built into that, so you can search for things via voice. Google announced earlier this year that a high percentage of their what would you say? What percentage of Google searches globally would you say are by voice? Just in a percent. 20. Yeah, so 20% of Google searches are voice, which kind of, and you can see it now where the voice icon in search is becoming more and more prominent and kind of evolving now. A lot of that obviously is coming from growth in foreign markets where populations are younger, and therefore that becomes the default way of working. But as these things go on, it continues, and we're seeing this change. Like Alibaba published their Singles Day results. I don't know if you're so in China. Singles Day is the 11th, and they recorded $25 billion worth of sales. Black Friday in the US last year was $3 billion, of which 40% were mobile. And in China, Alibaba's results was 90% of mobile. So 90% of that 25 billion was done on mobile. So you can see over the next kind of maybe 5, it might be as far as 10 years, but that kind of sway is going to end up going to things like voice and as well as potentially AR and VR as time goes on. And then you kind of got to ask yourself why voice? What's the benefits? As we know, it's not perfect at the moment. And the simple things is you can multitask. So if you're driving, then obviously you can interact with things with your voice and not, start rummaging around for stuff. But also if you're in the kitchen, which is obviously why these things live a lot, if you're touching meat and you're cooking, just being able to start music, it becomes this kind of strangely productive tool for something that is only a few words long. And then what we've found is obviously because we as a company we build these types of things for businesses, so internal business kind of voice tools. And when you've got people who are in factories, mechanics, surgical environments, your hands are busy. You don't want to have to be picking things up, both from a kind of a cleanliness point of view, but also just as a distraction. And if you're able to use voice and get voice feedback, then you can carry on with what you're doing. And surprisingly, that before we had all this tech, for the majority of history, voice has been our preferred communication method, just between me and you or versus me and a machine. So it's kind of, in some ways it makes sense to why both ends of the age spectrum are more aware of this than probably the majority of the population. And then the final thing is obviously, as you speak, you get this information quicker. You can articulate in a sentence a lot more than you can in, 6 drop downs, 3 buttons, a few sliders. If you can say it and it can understand you with great accuracy, then you can get that information a lot faster. And speech recognition obviously has been around for a long time. Everyone knows of, Dragon and having to read 6 books to train it. But with the improvements that have happened over the recent years, Microsoft Research in June this year managed to get the lowest ever error rate of transcribing to 5.4%, I think it was, which is on par with human transcribers. So we'll get slowly to the point where we get to the 98% kind of mark, and that's when, apart from minor context, it'll be no different than talking to humans. And you can see that if you've ever used the Skype translation, real-time translation tool at all. It's surprisingly good. So you can speak in English, and then in real time, the other end, it'll translate it into, say, German. But one of the biggest things is that we don't have to read all the books now. They've used transcriptions of many conversations of people using the phone. The reason why the likes of Google and Amazon enabled you to have free phone calls is so that they could record and then transcribe and then train all of their algorithms to then better improve the system. And then obviously you can then walk in and talk to it and it'll know. There was, it's not anymore, there was a hidden option in the Alexa app where you could train further the application so that it could understand you more. So what you might find is so like in our house, it couldn't understand Moana for a few weeks, and now it will understand Moana even for things we don't want it to, and start playing the Moana soundtrack. So, and then obviously Amazon came along as this things was happening, because we had Siri for a long time, and obviously Google Assistant, and then Amazon came along and made it 35 quid for a dot that you can put anywhere, and as well as it being a speaker, you just had to connect to the internet, and then you had this instant virtual assistant, which we'd never kind of experienced before. So if you've got any questions as we go, feel free to jump in. But obviously you know all that stuff, so it would be cool to know how it works. So the device itself works on a activation word, a wake word. So part of that is who's freaked out that it's recording everything, and when you eventually kill someone, it will know everything you have done. So basically, this is the fear, is that it's sending the data to Amazon, and obviously people are checking these things all the time, and what happens is it has a local processor on, and it's just looking for these wake words. Sometimes it gets confused, because you will see it that if the A word is mentioned on the TV, that'll pop up and start lighting up, or if there's just some background sound. But if you earlier in the year, Amazon got kind of subpoenaed to release some data about a device that was in someone's home that there was a potential murder charge against. And they were like, well, we haven't got the information, so we can't give it to you anyway, which kind of helped vindicate a bit. Surprisingly, that out of that scenario, the thing that actually ended up with the conviction was the smart meter for the water pressure, because you don't hose your driveway down at 3 a.m. So, you know, you've got to be vigilant with this stuff. At the end of the day, you know, just because it's not recording everything now doesn't mean it won't. And when Facebook release one, just assume it will record everything you say. So the key with the wait words is they make them all 3 syllables to try and mitigate it misreading. So it's Alexa, computer, Amazon, and Echo. So that's the first bit, which is to kind of stop you from opening accidentally. And then there's kind of these starting phrases. So these are things like open, start, play, ask. And they kind of arguably from a Alexa point of view and the Amazon services, they give them an insight into what they want to give you general knowledge on. With regards to your own application, you kind of don't get access to this. All you know is that your application has been kind of initialized. And then you have what is known as skills. So skills are basically small apps, and skills are a way for you to build some custom functionality for an application, and then an utterances is the variances of sentences, which we'll break apart in a second. The key thing on the skill side of thing is they are only kind of unique to your device. So you could have someone could build a skill called Southampton, and then someone else could build a skill for Southampton, and as long as you didn't have both of them on your device, they could both exist in the world. So there's no this is not like your millions.com type of thing that you have to kind of start taking care of. That being said, if you do try and put anything in there that is a brand, you have to verify that you have access to it, which is why ours will not be called Nerf War. And then an utterance. So an utterance is basically a sentence, and the sentence is the request, the thing that you want to do. And basically what happens from an utterance is it takes in the audio that basically you're sending through the device. Some cloud magic happens through Amazon's, where it's taking the audio, running it through a natural language processor, and then it is basically converting it to text with a confidence score, which is not visible to you. And then basically you're telling it a list of intents. You're telling it the things that you expect the application to do, and then it will match that based to a probability score. So if you've got utterances such as tell me a fact, you basically load it in with all the variants that you can think of for that request, and that just gives you a better way to for it to understand what you're trying to say and how it can work. Now, within the utterances, you have these things called slots, and slots are built-in and custom. So think of a slot. So instead of saying, tell me a fact about Bournemouth, tell me a fact about Southampton, tell me about Winchester, there are built-in slots that you can say, tell me a fact about City. And then you get a full spectrum of all the cities, countries, there's things like first name, surname. When it comes to dates, you don't have to say all the variants of dates. You can put a date flag in, and that will pick up things like today, yesterday, last Friday, a week on Tuesday, a specific day and time, a year ago. But from a developer point of view, all that information comes back to you in a strongly typed date object, which you can then obviously use how you wish. Then there is this thing called SSML, which is a standard across all voice systems. And what it is a way for you to then program and add some kind of personality to the voice as it goes back out. So, for example, you can tell it to whisper, you can tell it to add more emphasis, you can put spaces in between things, you can play audio in between it saying things, so you can send it a stream of media, and that is basically an XML kind of DSL type thing. But it becomes this thing that you can construct this output from the input and generate all these utterances, and you can build this application. The ones that are the most kind of successful are simple, quick, and obviously informative. But there are different ways in which you can do it. So an interaction should be under 8 seconds in your ability to gain some value. And you have either a single action or a conversational action. So a single action is as clear as, what is the weather? What time are Bournemouth playing tonight? And obviously more conversational is where you would prompt and be asked for different things. So what is there to drink? Then it could be like tea, coffee, or chocolate. It's like, would you like milk? Would you like sugar? And then what happens is that bolt-on of sentences, you can hold session within that and therefore build up a kind of history of the conversation that is being constructed, and then enable you to signpost as you go through. From if you've seen any of the Alexa ads, you can see the stuff that it's doing. It's things like turning off lights, putting music on. For example, Alexa, play the Moana soundtrack.
Moana, original motion picture soundtrack by various artists.
Alexa, stop music. But you can have things where within this that you can like we're starting to kind of use it from a business point of view. So playing music, turning lights off is all well and good. But if you wanted to do something like, for example, my wife will hate me for this. So we have Hue light bulbs in our house. And most of them are on right now. And even though we're here and the Wi-Fi is connected, it all obviously goes up to there. So I can say, Alexa, turn off all Hue light bulbs.
Sorry, I didn't find all Hue light bulbs.
Alexa, turn off Hue light bulbs. Alexa, turn off Hue lights.
Okay.
That's when the Wi-Fi goes down.
Yeah. Oh. So that'll update in a sec, but basically I'll get a phone call in a minute. And that is some. I'm gonna have to turn it back on. I'll get told off. But it's bless you. But it's quite, it's quite funny. But what it is it's something which seems massively overkill rather than just getting up and turning off a light switch. But what happens is you get used to it. My wife and daughter left the house, and my wife was going around turning all the lights off the other day, and she just turned to her and said, "Why don't you still Dad this and just say turn off all the Hue light bulbs?" So that's what happens. Like, you leave the house and you just do it, and it just gets more and more. You just get used to it as what functionality it can do. And then I'm linking one up to an IR blaster, so we can turn like the TV on and put Netflix on through voice, because TV's rubbish and won't do it automatically. But for us, then we started looking at how we could use these things in business, and could that be. Could we have the same kind of home and consumer kind of effect, but in a work environment? And it's no different. We have access, obviously, through APIs to HR systems, account systems, and training programs, etc. And you can start doing things like you see on here. And they all seem quite small and they seem minor, and it seems, I can just right click on that thing and send an email. But it comes back to the thing of, we used to do 90% of our work on the laptop, and now we do 50% of the work on the laptop and 50% on a phone. And over, our attention span gets shorter, and so does our patience, let's say, to get things done kind of more in a more kind of multitask type of way. One thing that we have started creating is using it as a training tool. So you can like record background sounds of like a factory. Instead of doing classroom session and then going in on site into a factory, you basically do your on-site training through the device, and it'll play background sounds, and it'll ask you a question, put a pipe will burst in the background, and then you have to react within that environment, because that gives you a bit of a psychological change from sitting in the classroom just filling in a piece of paper to being obviously on the floor as a health and safety scare is going on. Again, all for 35 quid, which for the cost of most training programs, it's pretty cost effective, at least in an interview stage, if nothing else. But obviously it's not perfect, because, that's where kind of the improvements and where we've found are things to really look at, which are people ask for things, the same thing, in many different ways. The classic one that Amazon shows as an example is 4T. So is that 4T the number? We're going to meet for tea. We're going to get 4 tees to play golf. And all these things kind of it goes on, or 14. And that's just even as you speak. And then if you look at it from a cultural point of view in different countries, the utterances, you have to really kind of build out a decent mapping of what you're going to ask and the right context around it. And whereas on the device, so for example, where we said we had open the Nerf War game, you can also just say, Alexa, so say for example you had a weather app called Cool Weather. You could say, Alexa, open Cool Weather. Alexa, now tell me the weather for Bournemouth. But you can also say, Alexa, what's the weather on Cool Weather? Really bad example of a name. But you don't have to kind of initiate it in that way. It will kind of look through all of the utterances, and if a sentence goes in, it will try and match it to the one it can. But accents. We tried it with a company in Newcastle. It did not work. Background noise. So they work really well if you're in an office or if you're in a meeting room where there's no noise. We tried one as an information type booth, with passing footfall, and it gets annoying. It doesn't quite work because it picks up other sounds. Now that stuff's improving. It has a 6 microphone array inside, and if you speak, what you'll notice, if I say from here, Alexa, it highlights where it thinks the sound's coming from, and what it will do is it will turn off the microphones from the other side of the device to try and minimize the noise as it tries to direct it. And then multiple voices. So if you speak or I speak at the moment, though they released something in the last few weeks where they can start to differentiate between who's asking, and then obviously you can just say, set the mood to my preference, or change the lights how I like, and it'll know it's you, versus obviously children or your partner or work colleagues. The hope with that is also from an API point of view is that you get access to some kind of user hash, so you can then obviously hold that conversation in state. So basically there's a Cortana type speaker, and someone speaks in French, and then someone gets a response in German, and then they speak in English, and you basically get this multi-language conversation happen between like 5 or 6 people. And the APIs have really availed to do that. We've used them, and they work quite well. But Amazon have really cornered the consumer love for the device, especially where they keep obviously slashing the prices on it in particular. Now, one thing, like with all technology, once it works and it looks good, everyone always wants to move it 5 pixels to the left. So in voice, it's no different. So what happens is, so we went through a process where we started playing around with this stuff, and then people started liking it. So we'd say, do you want to build a voice skill? And they'd go, yeah, cool. So they'd be like, so what do you want it to do? And they'd be like, welcome to Devs Coast. There are 5 meetups coming up, 2 conferences, 3 training days, and a partridge in a pear tree. Would you like to know more? Which is basically the same as when you ring a phone system now, and it's like, press 1 for sales, press 2 this. And it's just not intuitive. It doesn't give you, it's not saving you time, which is the whole point of voice. But there is a way kind of around it, and this is where I think the developer skill is going to differentiate one voice skill from the other. Because the context around it is everything. For example, the first time you use it, what you might want to do is, instead of saying all of what it is, you just say, this voice skill is a meetup for .NET developers. How can you help? And then the second time it gets used, maybe the first time they asked about a conference. So therefore you can kind of assume or give them some information about the last thing they said. And then where you're then saying, do you want to know more about this? And then it's a simple yes, no. And the shorter the sentence is, the more likely you're going to get a positive kind of lack of confusion. But then you can give them an out and you can say, but what would you want more information about meetups or training? And then if you know the meetups tomorrow, and you can build up this context around how it's being used, which gives it more of an assistant and more of an intelligence-based thing. And that is not what is happening now. This is what is it will come, and if anyone's looking or is playing with voice skills at the moment, from what we've seen, this is the stuff that's going to differentiate, because everyone's we'll do it after the break and you'll see how quick it is to build one of these things, but it's the stuff behind it that gives it the relevance and makes people feel kind of like there's some intent. And eventually, obviously, if you after today and you listened, and then it can cue you up, and even to the point of doing would you like to pay? Or I'm sure Rich would love it if it could say your subs are up, give me some money right now. But with this, it then comes back to you build your skill, you've got some sentences, it's all good, but will it work? Will people ask how you want people to ask? And that's where training comes in. So we've worked with a few companies on this now, and how it typically has gone is you treat the voice thing more like a chatbot type of thing, which is like a question and answers, and it's quite kind of procedural, kind of like a live chat FAQ, but that's not really fun. So first of all, we'd kind of give them a piece of paper and say, give us all the questions you want it to answer. So they do that. We'd then get all the answers, we put it in, and then they say, oh, no, we don't want it to be asked like that. Some people ask it like this, some people ask that like this. And then what happens is over time, you just get 20 variations of each question, which obviously go into all these different kind of spider webs of connections, and it gets a bit messy. Or you change it. So then what we started doing is have conversational sheets. And this is what you'll get from, if you went to an Amazon Alexa event, you have these conversational sheets with speech bubbles here and speech bubbles here. And again, it's great, but there is still an element of you're speaking to maybe one stakeholder or one person who knows a bit about the system, and you're not speaking to the person on the ground who actually is doing the job every day, or the user, the 90-year-old who wants to, so for example, the nan of the friend, she's got partial dementia, and one day, basically, on the list was 20 things of where's Tom? So she just was asking, where's Tom, where's Tom, where's Tom? Which then becomes a flag of just understand. So Tom was I think a brother or something from who'd passed away. But it becomes this kind of ability to kind of gain insight into your users. And within the application, you get this history of what has been processed. So you can find the things that maybe you've missed. If you have access to that device and them accounts. So if you're going to pilot this stuff, if with anyone, I would recommend that you set up all the devices, deploy them, connect them to your account, and then you can see the stuff coming through. Amazon are rumored to give you access to that through an API point of view, so you can aggregate. They were going to give you access to the original sounds recordings, but then the media got hold of it and everyone freaked out. I know obviously this is very developer focused, but branding is probably something we all should think about. So there is no UI, so no designers. Yay. From a branding point of view, what we've found now is because every time we want to play music, so we've got Amazon Prime, so it defaults automatically to Prime Music. So if you want to play anything on Spotify, you have to say, Alexa, play this on Spotify. So about 5 times a day, you're saying the word Spotify. What we found is that this, the same way that now with my son, the TV is not the TV is Netflix. Turning off lights is not turning off lights, it's dimming the hue bulbs. So from a brand point of view, where there is no UI, there is no logo, there is no tagline, you better hope your company name is speakable. Because if it can't understand it, then you've got no chance of brand awareness. And if there is no brand, it's going to Amazon. One thing which came, which I noticed a few weeks ago was there's an artist called Logic. Is anyone familiar with this song? So this is the name of the song. Okay. This is also a phone number. So basically, the song itself is around kind of quite a low suicidal kind of reflection song, and the phone number is the suicide prevention hotline in America. So that obviously so in today's society where we listen to music through your phone and through laptops, showing the phone number is awesome. You know, it slowly embeds into people. You know, if you're ever getting to that point, you have some visibility of where you could call. Try and say that to Alexa. Like, it's not going to work, you know? So what you would say now is you'd say, play Logic's latest track on Spotify. What you kind of potentially, if voice was the prominent you've got to go to where the market and where the most kind of obviously impact's going to be. But if voice does get to the point where it becomes the prominent interface for this type of thing, you'd probably want to call it Logic NSPL, which is the National Suicide Protection Lifeline, I think they call it. Which then just slowly builds up that kind of awareness. But it just shows, it's just a sense of remembering how to brand the things you're going to build with how people are going to ask for it or how they're going to perceive it. Everyone gets freaked out about security, especially business with this stuff, because it's sending voice, and we built an application for C-Suite, a big multi-billion pound company, to be able to query data and like being quite careful with what gets translated, and that there's a little context around it, but the context is relevant to the person listening to it. If you've got a device in an office which has the Apple's next earnings, and you can just go up and listen to it and then leave, you could make a few quid. So it's eventually they'll get to a point where they can fingerprint your voice so that you can so that they can identify you. That being said, you can get a user identifier and also a device identifier, so you can block access from if you're using, say, Azure to store the skill. You can certificate the communication, but then you can obviously then block out devices and have that kind of management or at a user level. And then what we started playing around with was the ability to use what we're calling clever passwords. So this is where you kind of train it to say, when you ask me a maths question, it's 2 of the real answer times the current date, like that type of thing. So it would change every time you would ask it. But that's more just an interrupt thing until we get to voice fingerprints. But even instead, someone records your voice and plays it back, all them things have to play a part with it. Let's go Amazon first. So basically, think of a skill as an app in the simplest form. What you would do is, let's say we come up with a skill. I was hoping we could have built a swag one for tonight, but let's not get too adventurous. Let's go with something that kind of already works. But we could walk through at the end of how we potentially would make it. So what I wanted to walk you through is one which is an earlier prototype of basically the Nerf war game, just to give you an idea of how that works. So there are 2 ways to build a skill. One is to use AWS's Lambda technology, or to use kind of an HTTPS endpoint. The Lambda stuff is what Amazon craves about and talks around, so it's quite easy to find information out about that. So I'll kind of leave that alone a bit, but just think about it in the way of it's AWS's way to do serverless technology. You can just kind of do a lot of wizardry type stuff, and then you can write JavaScript, C#, Python, etc., and just upload kind of like a function-based language and access all your AWS resources from there. We build 99% of the ones we've done, only one really, using the HTTPS way, because a lot of our clients have everything in Azure, and they want to keep it in there. They don't want to expose databases to the outside world. They just want to expose a secure, as secure as they can get endpoint to Alexa. So basically how it works is you define some information. So you currently, it's expanding all the time, but at the time of when we started doing this stuff, there was US, UK, and Germany were the 3 main countries. Recently, they've now expanded a lot to India. They expanded to Canada the other day. So Amazon's mission is to have Alexa working in any country that Amazon operates, because then you can buy stuff.
For help with that question, go to the help and feedback section of the Alexa app.
And if you buy one of these and you're going to use it with dev, just call it Echo. What you do then is obviously you give it a name, and then you give it a kind of invocation name, which, as you can see here, and these can obviously be anything. This is probably... Pardon? There you go. Is that better? Cool. And then from here you get, so if you want to publish it onto the store, you have to go through kind of certification. They make sure, it's kind of like an app store approval process. The obvious things are, you can't call it Alexa something, you can't hit any brand names, and they will ask you, if you called it Tesco's or something like that, they will ask you to prove that you are Tesco's. But if you pick something quite generic, and then you kind of decide, so there's different types of skills. There are, there's things around smart homes, there's media, there's a thing called flash briefings. If anyone's into content or into kind of audio production, I would, does anyone do anything like podcasting or kind of radio or any sound or music type stuff, news or anything special interest stuff? If you know anyone who does, there is a massive opportunity that would be ahead of the curve to do kind of 3-minute morning flash briefings of either company level or like your area, because then what you do is when you add them to the device and the flash briefings you can add without using the app. So you can just say download the Bournemouth Football Club flash briefing, and every morning you would just get a 1-minute intersperse of that information along with, say, your BBC News briefing and your weather update, etc. So but then there's the main thing, which is the kind of default skill, which is obviously what most people use. So you define everything in here, and then there's an interaction model, but we'll come back to that later because we tend to not start that way around, even though this is how they display it. And then you define kind of where your endpoint's going to live, and all you're kind of giving it is as a HTTP post point. Has to be on an SSL, has to be at least kind of, can't be a self-cert. And then you can define regional endpoints. You used to have to select kind of US or Europe if you're obviously here versus US, because latency is obviously important when it comes to audio. But now they're changing it because you can have obviously a UK version, you could have a German version, and then you can specify different endpoints based on proximity to your users, which is quite nice. If you're building something consumer-based, there is the option to give permission to the Amazon account. And get more information around, there's like to-do lists there, and now ability to do custom lists, as well as kind of address information. So you can see how it can be used over time for more kind of purchase-based behavior. And then from there, we've got good old kind of SSL information, and then the test. Now, one thing which is quite good on this, and it's probably something which is worth playing around with first, is you can just type stuff in and it will tell you can hear it from Alexa's voice. So I can just say hello, and it will come out of there. But what you can do is you can paste in this SSML, so you can say, HELLO. So you can basically start to construct the type of thing that you want to output without having to build it. There is a third-party tool, Echoizer, I think it's called. I'll ping Rich the URL so he can add it to the thing. But that is kind of like a virtual Alexa device for you to code against, which is quite good. You can then also enter your utterances here, and it will tell you the response it gets back. So this becomes kind of like a mini simulator, so you haven't got to keep working to the device. That being said, to be honest, the latency is, as you'll see in a second, is really low. And then obviously you go through publishing and privacy and all that compliance. To just give you an idea from a how it works point of view is, so at the moment I've got, are you familiar with ngrok? So basically ngrok's a tunneling technology, so you run it from the command line on your local machine, and then it exposes your local host to a publicly accessible URL. So you can basically you can tell this to go to that endpoint, and it'll tunnel it so you can debug straight to the device. just for the purpose of this, is RunScope, which is an API interception tool. So basically what we can do is, as we do the requests, we can go to RunScope here, and we can see the requests come through and all the information that we get. And then ngrok will then funnel that into the local host. So what you'll see now is it's going RunScope, ngrok, localhost. So that's obviously quite an aggressive route, and you'll see how quick that is. Versus if it was in the Azure data center, which is next to the Amazon data center on a fiber connection. So obviously the speeds are only going to be quicker. So what we're going to do, and what I'll do is at the end, because I don't want to upset it, I'll walk you through setting up the device, because there's a way to do it which you don't have to do on your phone, and will save you so many hours of pain if you have a Virgin Media box. So what we'll do here is, we have lots of Nerf guns in our office, and after we broke a few light bulbs, we thought we need to define some rules. So we wanted to build kind of like a complex game using, so you could say things like, it would basically play music, and then you would say, I've been hit, or it would say, at different intervals, it would say, right, who's got 3 bullets left, and they could go and reclaim bullets from around the office, because obviously we're grown-ups and we work a lot. Now we thought, well, let's do something quite simple and straightforward, and I'll show you the example to give you an idea of then obviously how we're going to build onto it. But just to give you an idea of how this works from a code point of view, I had a much cleaner solution, but Web API let me down, so I'm going to show you a slightly barraged version. So there's a project on GitHub called Alexa Skill Kit, so C# basically SDK. We've got a version which we'll probably publish at some point, which is a fork of it, but it's got a lot of niceties just wrapped around it to make things a bit easier. But we'll probably open source it anyway. But basically what you end up having is you have your kind of your controller endpoint. So this one here, basically it's called a speechlet, is the simplest way of putting it, and it's kind of obviously like a condensed bit of functionality. And what we're doing is we're just basically initializing a speechlet, and then we're going to return this response back. Because what you're doing is you're intercepting a JSON response from Alexa, you're working some stuff out, and then you're spitting basically a feedback, and then that's what the device says. So to give you an idea, so this is running at a breakpoint, everything's running. So if I said, Alexa, open Nerf War.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
So I'll run the application. It's like I planned it. Alexa, start Nerf War. And that's going from RunScope all the way back through. So, that's pretty quick. From this point, the
requested skill took too long to respond.
So what you'll see here is this is, let me just finish it off so that it gives us a response. So go to the back. Yeah. So this is what we get from the device. You get information about the session, the context, and the request. I'll show you another one when we get some actual information. But as you can see here, there's the application, so you can verify that if you wanted to, especially from a malicious point of view. The session identification, something to identify the user, just some information around things that are on the device, like is the audio playing, and then just some more information from here, and then you have the request, which in essence is the bulk of it. And even from this point of view, you can even that is quite a useful bit of response for the timeout. Now, if we run it to completion this time, so I'll just take this off. Alexa, start Nerf War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
So what we'll see now.
Are you ready for me to pick 2 players?
Don't. Is what we've done here is we've got the request through here, and what it's picked up is just a launch request. So what a launch request is, it's that where you said around sometimes the sentences at the start and at the end. So that's basically saying we've opened the app. And what that does is it fires into here, into this. So the SDK just gives you some kind of nice hooks, and you just get this kind of intent event and an on launch event. And the on launch event just enables you to obviously, if you wanted to say a welcome message, whatever it may be. One thing that you'll find is if you have a skill which people start to use a lot, 4 words rather than 5 words makes a big difference. People start to get really, myself included, you just get really frustrated when people are just saying stuff for the sake of it, when you just want to get information, especially where it's meant to save you time. So you find as you go on that you might find that you might want to keep optimizing for more kind of power use as developer, as user comfort kind of grows with it. And this speech-lit response, basically what this is doing is it's just sending out the XML back to the device and handing all the OAuth stuff, and that's built into the SDK that Amazon provides. Now, from here, I can now do something with it. So all we've got in here is this onIntent method. And what that's doing is it's saying if the intent, this one's very basic. If the intent is this, then return this message. If not, then just return this. The schema for utterances is as simple as this document. There's a very pretty interaction builder, which I'll show you in a second. But in essence, what it is doing is it's just generating this file. Where this is good is if you did build something to automate this type of generation, it's quite easy, obviously, just to pop this type of stuff in rather than having to upload or manage it through a UI. And what basically what it's saying is for the setup intent, these are, and obviously you can list as many as you want, these are the phrases that we expect people to ask. So for example, this is where you'd have your, thing like city or a date, for example. And then from this, you then have this kind of schema, which is the different intents. So we have a setup intent, and then we have the standoff, which once I play it will make a bit more sense. You have to have a stop, help, and cancel to publish, and that's just cancel obviously will terminate it. Help gives you, either 9 out of 10 times you're directing probably someone to a web page, or you will show a card inside the Alexa app. Amazon say that you should always go voice first. So the intent is that they shouldn't have to move to another system if you can kind of finish their interaction. And then stop obviously is just to end, it's kind of like cancel, but maybe you just don't dismiss the session because they might come back to it at a later time. I'll give you an idea of one which is maybe I'll dig one out once I've disconnected the HTML to show you in a minute. But basically you define your intent, you define your utterances, and then you wire it up into this method here. And then it's as simple as you get access to some C# strongly typed objects, and then you do some stuff with it. So let me run the application and you can see what it does. So now John's here, I can blame him. So originally I was meant to do this talk in December. So this was going to be a lot more prepared than it is today. So what the hope was or it will be, and maybe it'll be ready for December and it can be pre-December's one, which is you would be able to text your name to a number which is wired to Twilio, and that would basically put people into a random Nerf war situation. And then it would randomly pick 2 people, and then they would have a standoff. Okay, so that's the concept of the game. I did it in London. We just did it based on row and seat column. So, but I forgot Nerf guns today, which makes it very difficult. But let me just show you how it works. Alexa, start Nerf war.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Randomly select players.
Are you ready for me to pick 2 players?
Yes.
10, 9. It doesn't feel right. Let's build the atmosphere.
So this is an example. So basically what happened there is it jumped to the second intent. So there's 2 intents within the application. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix it. So if I go into here and we look at the interaction model, what you can see is if I want to assign if I want to run the player selection process, I can mention one of these 3 phrases. If I want to initiate the kind of standoff once the 2 players were down on the stage, then I would say these 2 phrases. But it's not what's happening because of the prototype is it's not picking up. It's not making yes please a correlation to the setup. So maybe it's too generic, maybe it's something else is conflicting with it because another intent has got it. So we kind of need to make it a bit more kind of obvious so it knows. So instead of saying yes please, let's go with it makes no sense obviously, but for the purpose of this it will prove us right. And what you can do there is now you literally just press save model and that's been deployed to the device. So Alexa, open Nerf War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Select randomly.
Are you ready for me to pick 2 players?
Dev South Coast.
Let's do this.
He doesn't love a bit of Crystal Maze.
I have selected 3rd row, 5 from the left and 2nd row, 2 from the right. Please come down to play. Can everyone give them a round of applause?
So what's happening there is, so basically it's, as you can see, it's trying to find the sentence that it can relate to, and then all it's doing is dropping into this endpoint, dropping into the speechlet, and then from the speechlet it's finding the intent and trying to match it closest to that based on the utterances that's come in. So that's where it's important that you find them. And in this case, it's obviously defaulting to the setup one. Obviously, if you were going to do this and where we've done ones in production, you would drop it into, are you sure? Do you want to ask something else? You try and give people a way to kind of get back to where they are. And then when we go into the setup, you can see in here, all we're doing is kind of monitoring a stage state. So what happens is in the session you have attributes, and the attributes you can get the values from and you can also push values to, and they persist as you go through. And what happens as you go through this, you send back a flag to say if that's the end of the session or not. So if you ask someone one thing, you can send back a flag saying that's all I want to know, and it will just turn the lights off. If not, then the light stays on and is waiting for another bit of prompt. You're only allowed to send back a maximum. It's advised it's less than 8 seconds, but you can send back a maximum of 90 seconds before it gets cut off, especially where it comes to audio. If you're going to do anything more than that, then you'd probably want to look more into a media stream type thing. Now, from here, as you can see, we've kind of, in this example, all we're doing, each time it gets an input, we're just incrementing a value just to go from stage 1 to stage 2, kind of, very like that, block 1, block 2, block 3, quite kind of basic. But as you can see here, this is the output that we're sending back, and it's quite straightforward. So we're saying let's do this, and there's some kind of, you can give a little twang to some of the words, to some of the letters, you can whisper. They've got some things that Amazon have created which just are a bit more bold, which are not a part of the SSML kind of specification. But what you can do is then you can intersperse it with an audio tag and just give it a URL. The MP3s have to be a specially encoded bit rate, which you can output from anything like Audition, quite straightforward. There are or some. You can do it from what's the audio, like FFmpeg type thing. You can run like the command line of it, and they give you the code for it to spit it out. But it's mainly just optimized for speed. But then you can drop back into text, and then if you wanted to, you could drop back into audio. So and then obviously on this one we just end the session. The next stage then becomes things like, so Alexa, start Office Nerf War. Oh, Alexa, start Nerf War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Begin.
Please stand back to back and take 3 steps forward when I start counting. I'm gonna count back from 10, then you draw. Got it?
Got it.
Let's do this.
So there we go, see? So there we get stuck again. So therefore we have to go into the model. And this is a lot of what the actual work is. It's not the coding. The coding's all pretty straightforward. It is getting that model right and learning the thing that that it's going to fire it. So here, the actual interaction is start the draw. So that's the thing I need to say. So what you'll find is if people use it, you find the things that they actually are going to say, and then you would add these utterances in as they go, and as you learn what people are going to do. So Alexa, start Nerf War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Begin.
Please stand back to back and take 3 steps forward when I start counting. I'm gonna count back from 10, then you draw. Got it?
Start the draw.
Let's do this.
So this is the fun. So let's go with got it.
Okay.
Alexa, open Nerf War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Begin.
Please stand back to back and take 3 steps forward when I start counting. I'm gonna count back from 10, then you draw. Got it?
Got it.
Let's do this.
Oh my god, I'm gonna kill him. So as you can see, it gets frustrating. So what we'll do now is, let's debug it. So from here, we'll grab this in 10. Alexa, start Nerf War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Begin. So there we go, we've got our first one in.
Please stand back to back and take 3 steps forward when I start counting. I'm gonna count back from 10, then you draw. Got it?
Got it. See, in here, the intent is coming through as still defining a setup. So this is where you have to kind of really...
The requested skill took too long to respond.
So you kind of got to go back in and go, right, what is it thinking it's getting? And then as you go through, it's really just kind of honing in these sentences. So it's never normally this bad. Alexa, start Nerf War. Last attempt.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Run it. Alexa, start Nerf War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Begin.
Please stand back to back and take 3 steps forward when I start counting. I'm gonna count back from 10, then you draw. Got it?
Begin.
10. 9. It doesn't feel right. Let's build the atmosphere a bit. 8. 7. 6.
So
5.
it will continue on, as you can imagine,
4.
and then the standoff will happen. And
3.
so the thing, as you can see, the thing with it is,
Half. 1 1/4. Get ready for it. Draw.
and then people fight Nerf guns and everyone has fun. But the again, it just cements to the importance of the language bit, because that's the bit that is obviously the bit that gets frustrating. And if it gets frustrating for you as developers, it's going to get frustrating as a user. So it's really optimizing that. The thing from a point of view of then having this information, what you can see is you can start to see the requests that come through, and then you can start to kind of optimize based on how things are interacting. Obviously, you can then look at that request if you intercept it, even in kind of a beta set. You can now run it to kind of a beta environment where you can test it to a small group of users, which you couldn't do before. And then you'd have to keep it in there if you wanted to keep it private and you didn't want to publish it. But Amazon are really driving forward the ability to generate money. People are getting paid is not a lot, especially things around game, health. The top applications to give you an idea are music, meditation, and gaming at the moment. So we're kind of at that point in its kind of development. So if we go to setup, is we'll do it with them. Right. Do not be offended. It will be worth it. And hopefully they haven't changed the rules and this will let me down. Alexa, start an Earth War.
Welcome to Office Nerf War.
Randomly select players.
Are you ready for me to pick 2 players?
So basically it will beep swear words and anything it finds offensive. You can obviously get around that by saying letters differently, but it kind of shows Amazon's intent for it as a product, that it is going for privacy focused, especially around children and family environments. So you just got to kind of be aware of them types of things. If you're interested, like Rich said, I'm getting punched in the face in a few weeks for charity, but linked to that, I've been kind of trying to automate my life and outsource or automate anything, and I've been documenting it. So if you're interested in that kind of life hack stuff, then check it out there. Cool.